I am Justice Sandy Margulies, and I am here today to interview my former colleague and friend, Justice Terry Bruiniers. And this is for the purpose of the Legacy Project. And let me start out with an easy question. Where were you born?
I was born in Detroit, Michigan, where I lived for less than a year.
And why did the family relocate to California?
Well, it was at the end of the Second World War. People were looking for jobs. My dad found a job with what was then, I guess, Pacific Bell in California, and decided to come out here. So packed us all up, stopped in Kansas to pick up my grandmother, and came to California.
Now, when we talk of all, there's 6 siblings?
Well, one of my sisters has passed away, but yes, I said there were seven kids in the family. So.
And where did you fall?
I'm the oldest of the 7.
Oh, you're the oldest. Oh, I didn't know that. And where are your other siblings located these days?
Well, let's see. I got one brother who's up in this area, out in Stockton, and then the rest of the family stayed in Southern California.
Whereabouts in Southern California?
Well, I grew up in a little town called Laverne, which is about 30 miles southeast of LA. It's out near the Claremont colleges.
And how long did you live in Southern California?
I grew up there. I said I was there until I came to Cal. And,
oh, so that's what got you up north.
What got me up north is when I came to Cal.
And why did you pick Cal? Why not UCLA, my alma mater?
Well, I actually came up here with a friend, and we went to look at Stanford because he was interested in Stanford. And we decided while we were here, we would come to Berkeley at the same time. And it was farther away from home.
So, did your mother work inside the home?
For the most part, yeah. Oh. Yeah, for the most part.
And what specifically did your father do for Pac-Bell?
Gosh, again, he was with him until he retired. I think he started out as a lineman for Pac-Bell, and then became an installation supervisor, and then at the end he was working downtown Los Angeles and commercial telephone installations, that sort of thing.
So you come up to Cal. What was your major?
Well, I started out as a physics major in my freshman year, and decided after my second year of calculus that was a bad idea. So I ended up being a political science major.
Yes, I've heard this story before from others. And while you were at Cal, is that when you met Susan, your wife?
I met Sue. We were both at Cal. We were actually both working at the same North Campus restaurant over Laval's. She was working as a waitress, and I was tending bar, and that's where we met. And we actually ended up having a couple classes together at Cal.
And so when did you get married?
Got married in August of 1969.
And when was your daughter born?
She was born in 1977, so we waited a while.
So did we. And where does your daughter live now?
She's in Denver, Colorado.
And she's married?
She is. We've got two great grandchildren, so Landon, who's 5, and Madeline, who's 3.
And you recently went with the family to Hawaii, or you took them to Hawaii?
Took them to Hawaii in February, so had a nice couple weeks over there.
And did Stu work in the home, outside the home, both?
Well, Sue was working. She worked for, gosh, I don't know how long. She was the executive secretary of the Bolt Hall Alumni Association. She worked there for a number of years until she retired from there. And I'm trying to remember what year she retired. I just don't recall.
And was she working there while raising your daughter, while both of you were raising your daughter?
She worked until Lisa was in high school, and then she retired and stayed home after that.
Now, Lisa went to law school, right?
Went to Golden Gate.
But as I understand it, she's not practicing.
She's not practicing, no. So right now, the 3-year-old keeps her busy at home.
I bet. So You went to high school in Southern California. Was it Laverne High School?
No, so I went to a Catholic boys' school. It was Don Bosco Technical in San Gabriel, which was a experimental program at the time. They had both college prep and a tech curriculum as well. So I did that.
And did you like going to an all-boys school?
In some ways, yes, and others, no. But I guess with the benefit of the passage of time, it's not as bad.
Now, we talked about that you went to Cal and you graduated with a political science degree. When did you graduate?
Well, I started in 1963. I took a year off after my sophomore year to kind of figure out what I really should be doing. And then when I came back to school, once I started working on the police department, I had to take a lighter load. So I ended up, my class would have been 67, I graduated in 69.
And then you went to law school.
Went to Bolt.
Now, and which
Berkeley Law.
Now we call it Berkeley Law, but
Berkeley
it was
Law.
Bolt. To you and I, it's Bolt.
Right.
And why did you decide to go to law school?
It's funny, when I had never really had any interest in law, and then one of the classes I took when I came back to Cal was an undergrad class in constitutional law, taught by Professor Charles Aiken, and that really got me interested in that. And then when I went on the police department, I spent a lot of time in court and decided that's probably what I wanted to do. So that got me interested in law school.
Now, did you apply anywhere else besides Bolt?
Actually, I did. I did my first year at Hastings.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did my first year at Hastings, and then I transferred to Bolt after that.
And you graduated Order of the Coif?
I did.
And you want to explain what that means?
Just top 10% of the class.
Did you participate in law review?
I did not. I qualified for law review at Hastings after my first year, and then when I transferred to Bolt, I guess I could have written my way in on that, but decided not to, so I did not.
When you were at law school, and I know you're really busy working in addition to going to school, were you a member of any organizations there? Or?
No, I really didn't have any time to do it. So between classes and working, it was
a little much.
Yeah. We did have a program where we did we got school kids classes together to do mock trials, and these are 5th and 6th graders. That was my community service, I guess.
Did you have any idea when you were in law school that you might want to be on the bench or?
Absolutely not. And I really had, when I first was practicing in the DA's office, I had no interest at all in going on the bench. I was enjoying what I was doing.
Did you have any favorite professors or courses at Bolt?
Well, even though I never practiced in estates and trusts, Ed Hallback, who was the dean there, said, became a good friend. Sue worked with him as she was the executive secretary of the Alumni Association, so we got to know the Hallbacks pretty well.
So I want to now talk about your occupation while you were attending law school, which was you were a member of the Berkeley Police Department.
I was.
And for what period of time were you a member?
Joined in September of 1967, and I left when I went to Hastings in 1970. I resigned from the police department, and then a variety of factors. After my first year at Hastings, the department was shorthanded. They brought me back for the summer, and then they offered me part-time employment, while I was finishing school. So I finally left the department when I went to the DA's office. So I left the department ultimately in June of '73.
Now, why did you decide to become a member of the Berkeley Police Department?
Easy, I was broke. No, I was the oldest of 7 kids. My folks paid for college for my first couple of years. Then when I came back, I figured I really shouldn't be asking them to do that. That's why I was tending bar at Laval's and doing things of that sort. But the money was a little tight, and there were from my bartending activities, I knew 1 or 2 of the Berkeley cops that I got to know fairly well. And then they had this recruiting campaign. I remember at the time it was, said the poster said 40 tough jobs for 40 gentlemen, and they were paying $872 a month, which was a fortune to me, at least at that time. And so I figured, well, I can work at night, and I can go to school during the day, and it was a little more demanding than I thought it was going to be, but that's how I ended up there.
Well, you were working there during very, what we would call interesting times.
Yes.
Protests, People's Park, I assume.
People's Park, I was there.
Oh, you were at People's Park.
Oh, absolutely. I was
So for those who may watch this video and are unfamiliar with People's Park, why don't you go ahead and explain what we're talking about?
Well, People's Park is just a couple acres of dirt. Well, it's a little more than that now, but it's a couple acres of land just off of Telegraph Avenue between Haste and Dwight Way. And it had been vacant for so long. The university was going to build housing there. They never did, and it became kind of just an encampment. The street people just took it over, and so it was a matter of months, but it was growing and growing and growing. The university finally decided they were going to do something with the property. So they brought Berkeley police, university police, sheriff's office in to clear the park, and we did that at like 11 o'clock at night, and then they put a fence around it. But they left a couple squads of people. I was on a special squad at the time. They had probably a dozen of us and a couple CHP squads to hold the intersections at Dwight and Telegraph and at Haste and Telegraph, and I was at Haste and Telegraph. And all of the extra police that were there overnight, they started sending home, and I said, that's not going to end well, because as you would expect, at noon there was a rally in Sproul Plaza, which my friend Dan Siegel, who was later a classmate of mine at Bolt, as a matter of fact.
He was a practicing attorney, I believe.
He is, still is, I believe.
Yes, he is.
Told the crowd, let's go take the park, and you could hear the roar go up, and so we looked down Telegraph Avenue toward campus, and you could see the crowd coming down, and at the time I said, this is going to end badly, and we did manage to control it until reinforcements got there, but it was a couple of weeks of riots after that, so it was pretty bloody.
So much for what you thought would be a quiet evening at night.
Well,
for night duty.
Well, I assumed it would be a quiet evening. I did not assume it was going to be a quiet day.
Yeah.
But it was quite the day.
And besides dealing with protests at UC Berkeley, what other duties did you have or experiences with the Berkeley Police Department?
Well, so when I started, I worked patrol, and I was working at night, and for the most part, that then it was seniority, and you worked through to the day shift. But I had worked this was called the 4th Platoon. It was called Patrol Special Detail. So, you had a platoon of officers who worked different hours, different times, plain clothes sometimes, uniform sometimes. So I did that for a while. I was doing that at the time at People's Park. And then when they asked me to come back, they were shorthanded anyhow. they put me in the detective division, and so I was working essentially half-time back there and doing, rotating between homicide and burglary and, anything they were shorthanded on.
How would you describe your experience with Berkeley, with the Berkeley Police Department?
It was.
Excuse me, can we go off for just 1 second? Okay. So we were talking about what your experience was like.
It was great, so it was certainly interesting times in Berkeley. So I was proud of the job we did. It was so coming from, as a kid from a middle-class family in Southern California into police work was definitely an adjustment. I mean, it tends to make you a little cynical, but it was a breadth of experience that I'm glad I had.
Now, I assume your fellow law students, some of them knew what you did in the real world?
Most did, I think. Not everybody, but most did.
And did that create any sort of negative reaction from them?
Actually, surprisingly not. I mean, certainly there were a number of people that would be certainly considered significantly left of where I was, but I never had any negative, at least no direct negative reaction. I mean, people I think were a little intrigued by it. I mean, occasionally I'd show up for class and I'd have a gun in my briefcase, so. But.
So I have to bring this up because I read about this in an article about you, that there was student voting. And how did you show up to the student polling location?
This was in the aftermath of People's Park, and it was probably a couple weeks later, but we were still patrolling into 4-person squad cars. And as I said, this went on for almost 2 weeks, almost to Memorial Day, I guess. And there was a student election, and we were in a 4-person squad and had our riot gear on. And we're driving down to Bancroft, and I noticed there's a student polling place at right there in the plaza next to Bolt. And so I told the driver, I said, stop for a minute. I still had my, I had my student ID card with me. So I said, I'm gonna go vote. So I walked up, presented my ID card, and voted in the student election.
Did you receive any reaction or funny
Oh yeah,
looks?
no, there was some stunned looks on people's faces when I was doing it.
So how did you manage to balance working and going to law school?
It was a challenge. But when I first started at Cal, just a kid with no real self-discipline. 17 years old when I started at Cal, and and I wasn't really working at what I was doing. I wasn't really enjoying it in any event. That's why I said I think kind of the best thing that happened to me was Marine boot camp. I mean, this was in the middle of the Vietnam War, so.
And just to clarify, you also, in between everything you were doing, you became a Marine Reserve.
During that year I took off, I figured that if I didn't join the reserves, the result was pretty clear. I mean, I had friends going to Vietnam all the time. So I joined the Marine Reserve. I did 6 months of active duty, and then 6 years of reserve time. But I said for a 19-year-old kid, said Marine boot camp was a very good thing.
So it sounds like it provided you with discipline or disciplinary skills.
Provided you with some self-discipline, and that kind of helped. When I'm trying to juggle class. I mean, I think I probably did better in law school than I would have if I hadn't been working.
Yes, I actually understand that, speaking from personal experience. So you're working at night and you've got classes during the day?
Yep.
When were you sleeping?
Well, undergrad, I was, really working night and going to school during the day. And when I was at Bolt, my hours, because I was working halftime, were flexible, so I could set my own schedule. So what I'd do is, I wasn't really working nights. Very rarely would I have to work nights. I'd finish classes, go down to the police department, work for a few hours, go home.
So you graduate from law school, you have to take the bar exam. Where did you take it?
Took it here in San Francisco. So took it over at the Masonic Hall.
And you passed the bar.
Passed the bar.
And now you have to get a job. And where did you get that job?
Alameda County District Attorney's Office. That was my focus. That's where I wanted to work. I mean, said I knew people there, obviously, because having been in court and having testified, worked with a lot of the DAs there. But that was my focus. That's where I wanted to work.
And you certainly had a step up on others because at least you knew the penal code sections.
Had a little practical experience with that.
So you joined the office, as we call it,
Right.
in?
I think it was in October or September when we got the bar results. But it was within a week of getting the bar results.
And what year was that?
That's in 1973.
And that's where you and I met, was
Right.
in the Alameda County
Right.
District Attorney's Office. What did you start out doing there?
Well, my first assignment was in juvenile out at 150th.
Mm-hmm. Sam Andro,
I was out there with Walt Brown.
yes, who ran juvenile for many, many years.
And from there went to Oakland Muni
Yes.
and was there until I went to the Superior Court.
I called Oakland Municipal Court trial by fire.
It definitely was. I said again, it's show up, get your file, and go to court.
That's right. And sometimes you were reading the file as you were walking to court.
Well, that's because you got a handoff from somebody else.
That's correct. I remember all of that. So, how long were you in the municipal court system before you went to do felonies in Superior Court?
I'm trying to remember what it took. I think it was all told around 18 months to get to Superior Court at that time, because at that point it was pretty much seniority.
Yeah.
So I think it was around 18 months.
So you got to Superior Court, and I assume you were at the courthouse in Lake Merritt.
Yeah, I was there the whole time. I never went out to South County. So.
So what kind of cases did you start trying in Superior Court?
Boy, the way we had the trial team set up then, said you got pretty much everything. Said from run-of-the-mill burglaries, sexual assault, homicides. We didn't have at that point specialized teams. We didn't have sexual assault teams, things of that sort. So.
There wasn't a Team 5 or a Team X or something like that.
Well, so we had the trial teams numbered, but I think we had like 4 trial teams, something like that. And I was on Tom Orloff's team for a while.
Oh, that's good. So, did you try any capital cases?
Tried 2.
And what were those?
One was first one I tried. Was a kid who was just 18. It was a pretty brutal, vicious murder. It was a woman in her late 80s, I think. So it was rape and stabbing. So it was one of the things where the evidence was clear. There were 3 people who did it. He was the only one that was ever caught. Said that was life without
Possibility of parole.
possibility of parole verdict. Although, given his age at the time, I don't know. So and then the second one I had was a death verdict, and that was the Heichman case.
Right. And just briefly, why don't you go ahead and tell us about
Oh,
that?
He murdered a woman that he had raped to keep her from testifying against him. Murdered her just I think the night prior to the preliminary hearing where she would have testified.
And do you remember who was the opposing counsel in that case?
Oh, yeah, Hal.
Oh, not Hal Friedman.
Yeah,
Hal Friedman.
Hal Friedman was the opposing counsel.
And I assume he had backup counsel, right? There were two of them.
You know, I'm trying to remember who worked with him on that.
Oh, it doesn't matter. The point I was getting to was you did it by yourself,
yeah.
Whereas defense counsel, there were two of them.
Yeah, typically, yes.
Yeah, that's very typical. And I don't know if the district attorney's office still does it that way, but there was no backup.
Exactly.
Do you remember who your investigator was, out of curiosity?
Yeah, Dick Presiding.
Oh, very good. The other case I wanted to talk to you about was the Justice Paul Havonick case. And why don't you just go ahead and tell us about that?
Oh, that was once that I remember I was, at that point, I think I was a supervising deputy down in Oakland Muni, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I think you were supervising me.
And one of the police officers came in to me to ask about getting a search warrant. And I said, okay. He said, well, you should know this is a justice.
Here in the First District Court.
Here in the First District. Well, so show me what you got. So they actually, the officer had gone to the house because Debbie Havonick, Paul Havonick's wife, had reported a burglary.
And this was at the Hiller Highlands condominiums, right?
It was the Oakland Hills. I don't remember whether it was Hill or not.
Okay.
But it was the Oakland Hills. And in investigating the burglary, he was in the house, and it was, I think they had a Betamax tape recorder, tape machine stolen or something like that. He saw marijuana plants in the house and some marijuana seeds. I mean, so they really weren't being too careful about keeping it hidden. So the beat officer reported it to the narcotics officers. They went out. The officer had told them he saw marijuana plants growing on the back deck of the house. They went down below, took some pictures up, with the telephoto lens of marijuana plants growing on the deck. So I helped them do the warrant. I don't remember who issued it, but they went to the house, recovered the marijuana plants, and so I was still in Oakland Muni when the case came. They charged the case. It came through, and I did the preliminary hearing, which drew a fair amount of media interest for a preliminary hearing. So we put on more than a bare bones PX at that point.
Did you follow the case to the courthouse?
Yeah, I did.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I said, Lowell said that would be a vertical prosecution. So.
And that was Lowell Jensen,
Lowell Jensen, who was then the
district attorney of Alameda County.
And so I came back to the courthouse to try that, and we had a retired Supreme Court justice. I'm trying to remember who it was now, frankly, I'm drawing a blank, who had been assigned to try the case. Got a lot of pretrial publicity. We went through a lot of motions. We had Fry Margolin.
Didn't you have Penny Cooper?
Penny Cooper was there, Fry Margolin was there, and literally on the morning of trial, we had a jury panel ready to go. Havonick entered a plea.
And did he plead to a felony?
No.
A misdemeanor?
No, he pled to misdemeanor possession, and actually, wait a minute, I'm trying to think back now, whether that was even a wobbler then.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But anyway, he pled.
He pled guilty and then ended up resigning from the court.
And the case against his wife was dismissed?
Well, she had taken diversion early on.
Oh, she had, okay.
Yeah, I mean, their approach was always to have her try and take the rap from that. That was, one of the interesting parts of doing the preliminary hearing is that at the preliminary hearing, both Paul Havonick testified and Justice Newsom testified.
Which, as we know, is very unusual, because normally someone charged with a criminal offense does not testify at the preliminary
Right,
hearing,
but-
because you don't want to give up what your defense is.
Yeah, and so Justice Newsom was essentially trying to give him a bit of an alibi that that he and Debbie had split at the time, that that Havonick was living with Newsom. And in any event, that's I think they were trying to put as much pressure as they could, on to the poor preliminary hearing judge to see if they could get the case tossed out at the PX level. That was Ken Koichi.
And he didn't toss it out.
No, but I said that's why we put on more than a bare bones preliminary hearing.
So what other assignments did you have while you were a member of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office?
Well, I think again, I worked juvenile, worked down in Oakland Muni initially, trying cases down there. Went up, spent about a year at the courthouse, trying felonies up there. Went back down to Oakland Muni to be a supervising deputy for a while, and then back to the courthouse. And again, a little bit of everything while I was there.
So you decided to leave the District Attorney's Office. In what year?
1980.
And why did you decide to leave?
Well, I took a look around and decided I certainly was never going to be district attorney in county. So we had a number of people lined up as potential successors to Jack Meehan at the time. My future in the DA's office is going to be doing effectively what I'm doing now. So if I'm going to try anything different, to try something else, I better do it now, or my opportunities to do it are going to run out. And I had an offer from a friend of mine to join his firm here in the city.
And the name of the firm was?
Farron Cooper.
And it eventually became Farron, Cooper, and Bruiniers,
Yeah.
right? So did you join as a partner?
No, I came in as associate, and then they made me a partner after about a year over there.
How long were you with the firm?
Well, I was there until I was appointed to the bench. So I started in January of '81 and was appointed to the bench in October of '98, and I was sworn in October of '98.
So what kind of cases did you handle?
Again, it was a general business practice. So I was the only one in the firm that did any litigation. So if we had any litigation to be done, I would do it. We had a specialty in practice before the Federal Communications Commission, so I did the hearing work at the FCC. We did primarily real estate and general business work, so I did the transactional end, and I do the litigation end too. So.
Is this where you started developing an interest in technology?
Well, I developed that because I had we had a client who was a computer manufacturer. So kind of a long story, but in any event, we had some clients that were in Hong Kong that were investing in this company. They asked us to represent the company. I became general counsel for the company, and so learned a little bit about computers as we went along. I had a background in electronics from high school anyhow.
Oh, okay.
So I had a little background in that, and then, but I figured if I'm going to be general counsel for the company, I should know a little bit about
what you're
the
dealing
product.
with.
And and then when I was managing partner of the firm in my rotation, I computerized our firm, got the computers for us. Actually, went down and built them myself, put them together myself for the firm.
Did you run into any resistance to computerizing the firm?
Actually, not internally. I think 'cause we were a small firm. I mean, so I think the most we ever had was 10 lawyers, and so everyone kind of understood the necessity of what we needed to do to get to move the firm forward.
And the firm was located in San Francisco?
Yeah, down at originally up on Sutter Street, and then later down on Montgomery in the Rust Building.
So while you were practicing law with the firm, were you a member of any organizations or committees, anything like that?
Not really, no.
You weren't a member of the business, was it the business lawyers?
ABTL,
ABTL, thank you.
Business Trial Lawyers. No, I mean, actually I probably should have been, but I wasn't at the time.
So you decided to apply to the Contra Costa Superior Court bench. Why?
You know, I'm trying to think back to what really was the catalyst for that, because again, I'd never been particularly interested in applying for the bench. I didn't even know how to do it. And I think it was Tom Orloff's campaign kickoff dinner. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a number of people we both know on the bench, I said Rod Rollison, a couple of people, about what they were doing, whether they enjoyed it, and that was the first time I actually thought about doing it. And then I realized I didn't even know how to do it. I didn't know how to go about it. So I had to start kind of looking around, figuring out what the personal data questionnaire was, and
the PDQ.
The PDQ. So that was kind of the catalyst. I guess so. Again, it was one of these things where you're at a stage in your career and you say, well, I'm happy with what I'm doing, but am I going to be happy doing this 5 years from now?
So who appointed you to the Contra Costa Superior Court? Which governor?
Pete Wilson.
And when you were first appointed, what year, by the way, did you start on the Contra Costa Superior Court?
1998.
What was your first assignment?
Well, my first assignment, and this was just immediately after court consolidation. I had applied for the Superior Court. I was appointed to the Superior Court, but they sent me down to the Richmond, what was the old Richmond Municipal Court, and I was there all of maybe 2 weeks. I hadn't even unpacked my boxes yet, and they needed someone to try an extended civil case. We had a case that I guess they were already 2 weeks into it, and trial judge became seriously ill and ultimately passed away, and it was clearly going to be another 2-3 weeks of trial, and so they didn't have anybody that was free to try it, and they asked me if I would pick it up and try it. So I spent a few days reading transcripts and then tried the rest of the case.
So that was your first experience as a judge trying a case?
Actually not, no, because the very first day I showed up down in Richmond, and again, before I even had my boxes unpacked, said my clerk walked in with a file and said the jury panel will be here in 15 minutes.
And this sounds like back being in
yes,
the DA's
exactly,
office, doesn't
exactly.
it?
That was my first trial.
And do you remember what it was about?
Yeah, it was a homeless woman who was clearly mentally disturbed, who had it wasn't a BART police officer, it was a BART attendant, was trying to get this woman off of a train after it had reached the station in the middle of the night, and she had spit on the officer, so they charged her with assault. And,
did she get convicted, if you
no.
remember? So you have that short trial, and now you have to step into the middle of the civil trial.
Yeah, Superior Court civil trial.
Now, how was your adjustment to that? Or did you find it difficult? Did you just get through it very smoothly without any bumps?
Well, I wouldn't say without any bumps, but I think it went fairly smoothly. The attorneys seemed satisfied. But no, that was an interesting experience. I mean, walking into the middle of this trial, and it was an insurance bad faith case, and with some local personalities who were fairly well known. It was an interesting experience. I actually enjoyed doing it.
So Speaking of adjustments, how would you describe, did you find it to be a difficult adjustment going from the practice of law to being a judge?
Well,
in other words, did you find the transition challenging or difficult?
Well, yeah, I guess the first couple months, the first couple trials, it's hard to kind of separate your advocate's role, and you're thinking of the case in kind of those terms. So if I were doing this, I would do that. And it takes a little bit to kind of move your mindset away from being an advocate.
Can I ask you, did you ever, sitting as a judge, have a situation where a case is being tried, whether it's criminal or civil, and the witness, as we used to say, was obviously going sideways, and the attorney who was asking the questions was somewhat befuddled or surprised by the answers he or she was getting?
Yeah.
And did you have the reaction, thank goodness it's not me anymore?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So after you got through the civil trial, where were you assigned?
I went back down to Richmond for, I guess, 4 or 5 months, and then did my family law assignment. So I came back to Martinez to do family law for a couple of years.
And what other assignments did you have?
Did family law, so then moved to direct calendar civil court. Did that for a couple of years. Moved from there to the complex litigation court. Did that for a couple of years. Then served as presiding judge.
Was that 1 or 2 years?
It's 2 years. And then, well, it's a year as APJ.
Right, assistant presiding judge.
And a year as presiding judge. And then from that went to a criminal calendar, and about that time got appointed to the Court of Appeal.
What was your favorite assignment on the Superior Court?
I love the complex litigation court. That was great because it was direct calendar, so you had complete control of the case from start to finish. You had interesting cases, good lawyers, and you had a reduced caseload because of the complexity of the cases.
Right.
So that was the perfect assignment, I thought, on the court.
So describe for me what it was like to be presiding judge of the Contra Costa Superior Court.
Well, as many of my colleagues have said, it's like herding cats, right? You're trying to organize people that don't particularly appreciate being organized, but I enjoyed it. I had the ability to kind of see what direction you hoped the court was moving in, and certainly my predecessor and I had kind of the same worldview on what we ought to be doing. We were still then kind of assimilating the difference, so the consolidation of the old municipal courts with the Superior Court was not completely smooth in any jurisdiction, so there were some difficulties with that, and cultural differences that just took some time to overcome. So
you decided to apply for the Court of Appeal.
Did.
Why?
I think the only reason that I applied, and I don't think I would have otherwise, is that Barbara Jones, who was then PJ in Division 5, had called and asked me to fill in pro tem. So I did a pro tem stint here for 7 or 8 months, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I honestly didn't think I would, but it was an opportunity I couldn't say no to. And so I got here and decided I actually enjoyed it, and decided to apply.
So Barbara Jones was, at that time, the presiding justice in Division 5. Did you know her before she called you?
Did not.
Interesting. Now, do you know why she picked you?
Well, I think one of my former colleagues, Pat Sepulveda, may have recommended me. But,
Yeah, my good friend Pat. Uh, so you did the personal data questionnaire, you went through the Jenny Commission, you interview. Which governor nominated you to the Court of Appeal?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And when were you confirmed to the Court of Appeal?
In June of 2009.
And you went to Division 2?
No, Division 5.
Oh, 5. You know, I always call 5 2, and I don't know why. But anyway, you went to Division 5.
I did.
And who were your colleagues?
Henry Needham, who I'd known for years, obviously. Mark Simons, who I'd also known for years. And of course, Barbara.
And Henry Needham was in the Alameda County DA's office at
Right.
one point. Mark Simons had been in the Contra Costa Public Defender's office, and then you met Barbara when you...
Yeah. Well, Mark was on the court. Mark was...
Right, so you met him. That's right. Was he on the court when you were on the court in Contra Costa County?
Yes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I said, he was PJ, and at the time he got appointed, and so the.
So, how about the transition? How did you find? Did you have any difficulty transitioning to the Court of Appeal from the trial court?
Not as much because I'd been here and done it, but as you know, it's a lot more quiet here. So the biggest change when I came here on assignment the first time is the phone doesn't ring. People aren't running in and out of your chambers all the time. You're not jumping on and off the bench. So
you have time to think about the issues.
It's a lot more cloistered.
Yes. Did you feel more isolated?
To some degree, yeah. I miss working with the lawyers directly, as I did on the trial court, and so it's just a different pace. You have the luxury of time here that you never have in the trial court. You have colleagues, to work with, to discuss matters with it at a more leisurely pace than running down the hall to stick your head in the door and ask somebody a question.
So I've done a little research on you. I've talked to my various sources. And my understanding is in Division 5, there was a system of rating the cases from what are considered the less difficult cases to the very complex.
Yeah, it's a little cumbersome. We're not doing it anymore.
No, they're not doing it anymore. But according to my sources, when you had the meeting selecting the cases, that you generally would pick a very complex case and then write it yourself.
Sometimes.
My sources were very impressed. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I said I always thought the larger cases typically tended to be the more interesting cases. They had more issues, things you could really kind of delve into. And so I'm not sure my staff always appreciated it, but we tend to take those when we had the choice. And I wouldn't always write them myself, but I would certainly write. I always picked one case to write. Yes, because I enjoyed doing it. And I remember we had one particularly complex one that I kind of broke it up. I said, I'll write this part, you write that part, you write that part.
So what did you enjoy most about being on the Court of Appeal?
I enjoyed the people I worked with, always. I said you've got good, smart people. Said they wouldn't be here otherwise. You've got interesting work to do, important work to do. So we have a chance to affect the development of the law. How many people have a chance to do that, right? It doesn't happen all that often, but certainly sometimes you can certainly have some impact. And it was a wonderful job.
What achievements and/or cases are you most proud of from your tenure on the Court of Appeal?
Gosh, in terms of cases, so I remember I looked at your suggestions on topics, and I was trying to think about that. I mean, so, the cases sometimes tend to blur. You remember particular parts of things, but I remember, I said I did have one case that unexpectedly kind of turned up at the Supreme Court, and it was nice to have the Supreme Court agree with me on a search and seizure issue.
You remember what the issue was?
It was, what level of information is required on an anonymous tip to justify a traffic stop. This was Navarrete was the case, I think Scalia had a notable dissent in that case, but but I thought it was an interesting case and
Plus, it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme
Well,
Court.
I said again, it was one didn't even stop at our Supreme Court, so it ended up there. So, and I remember Nace Ruvalo telling me at the time, he said that's not a good sign.
Little did he know.
Yeah.
Throughout your judicial career, you were very involved in bringing technology to the courts, and I want to talk a little bit about that with you. How did you get involved in trying to bring technology to the courts?
Well, I actually had, when I first came on the bench, had expressed an interest in going on the Court Technology Advisory Committee, and so I got the appointment because at the time they had a spot that they opened on a lot of the committees for new judges, to get the new judges involved. Mm-hmm. So I was appointed and ended up serving on that committee for almost the entirety of my career.
Did you eventually become chair of the committee?
I was chair. I was vice chair for a while when Ming Chen was the chair.
Right.
And then after Ming left, I became chair.
So let's talk about what was achieved by the committee during your tenure.
Well, gosh, I remember when I first came on, said everybody was panicked about the Y2K, and everybody was putting all their time and effort into that, and that kind of went by without a hitch. And then obviously we got into the infamous CCMS, the California Case Management System. I was obviously intimately involved in that for a long time.
And the purpose of that system of the proposed system was?
To develop a unitary case management system for all case types and for all courts across the state.
So, for example, if I was in Alameda County, I wanted to know something about a case in Los Angeles, the idea was?
All the information would be entered in common database with, again, uniform standards for all of that. I was not involved at the inception. There's a long history and kind of boring behind that, but it started out as what was going to be the Los Angeles or Southern California case management system. And there was money set aside to do that. And then the politics took over, essentially. And that was never smooth. There were huge conflicts at the time between, for example, the LA Superior Court and the AOC. Somewhere in that process, so the chief at the time, Ron George, and the governor having their budget meeting, and the governor was complaining about putting all this money into these multiple case management systems around the state, and so the decision was that we would develop the case, the California case management system, and
should I say for a variety of reasons it didn't happen?
Didn't happen. I said ultimately said the system was finally developed, and again, it wasn't a matter of technical failure. It was a success as a system. As a matter of fact, Orange County is still using a version of that now. They were going to buy a new system and found it didn't work as well as what they had. So Orange County essentially is using CCMS Lite, is what I would call it. Yeah, it failed not for technical reasons. It failed politically, and it just had too much legislative opposition. It was just never going to succeed. And I think that was the problem from the inception, and we're just never able to get beyond it.
So, at least here at the First District Court of Appeal, we've gone paperless. And were you involved in that process?
I was.
How so?
Well, the appellate clerks had been pushing for a long time to get an e-filing system, and so when I came on, I started working with them and said, we can do this, and we didn't have any money to do it, so I came up with the proposal. We will do a no cost to the court system. We will get the vendors to bid on this. The vendors will make their money from the filers, not from us, and and we can be the pilot here in the First District, and just do a proof of concept, show it can be done, show that we can get vendors in. And we had, 8 or 9 vendors that applied, and then we selected. Peter Siggins and I helped work together to write the rules, and including the rules which are still in effect, I think. And then once we showed it could be done, then the other, certainly Chief it was great to have her support. She supported the effort from the beginning, and it wouldn't have happened without that. But once we showed it could be done, then other courts wanted to do it. Again, LA had a different idea of what they wanted to do for a while, but again, we got past that too. But
So did they buy in eventually?
Eventually, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So to your knowledge, are all the districts, do they all have e-filing now?
As far as I know, all the districts are now on e-filing. So I think everybody was live. By the time I retired, everybody was live on the system.
And a lot of us, as you can see, have the double screen so that we can bring up the record on one side and then whatever we're drafting on the other side.
Well, you said, even before we went paperless, I tried to get my chambers working as much as possible. Said paperless, particularly when you had these voluminous records. Having everything in searchable PDF is.
Well, yeah, actually, you're lucky you're not on the Court of Appeal right now, because with many of us working at least part-time at home without a double screen, I'm coming in here and printing out and taking certain records home. But the paperless system, I think, has worked very well here. So
not popular with everyone.
I think, yes, not everyone, but on the whole, I think most are doing it. So you retired from the Court of Appeal. How many years? Well, how many years in total were you on the bench?
Well, a little over 20, but if divided between the trial court and the appellate court, if you count the time I spent here on pro temping, it was pretty much equal, about 10 on each. Yeah.
Why did you decide to retire?
Again, one of these things where you say, okay, I'm happy with what I'm doing now. So, what about 5 years from now? So, again, it's a job I could have stayed doing, for a long time. So, I joke with Mark Simons. He's working for minimum wage. And obviously one of the factors is that our retirement system, JRS2, at the end of, once you max out at the end of 20 years, essentially you are working for minimum wage. But if I wanted to do anything else, I thought about the private judging. If I wanted to try that, there's a window in which you have an opportunity to do it. So either you stay and ignore what you're giving up to do that, or just look to doing something else. And I thought I'd have more time to spend traveling, doing things of that sort. And obviously, when Sue became ill, that just didn't happen.
So, which private judging group did you join?
Joined JAMS.
And why did you select JAMS?
Well, I was debating between JAMS and ADR Services, both of whom have a very respectable presence in this area in particular. But I just thought JAMS, as a national organization, gave me some better opportunities to do things like arbitrations. And so I've been trying to focus on doing that.
So are you doing mediations also?
Yeah.
Are you doing any appellate advisement or review?
I've got one coming up next week.
So do you prefer arbitration, mediation, or it doesn't matter to you?
Well, I would say only in the sense that arbitration is just being a judge. That's what we're used to. It's a little easier doing that, but mediation is settlement. So,
are there any particular kinds of cases you're handling?
I haven't specialized in anything so far. But general business litigation, employment, things of that sort. But,
so, how many days a week are you devoting to private judging?
Well, not as much. Well,
not as much as you want.
Not as much as I'd like. The first year, I just didn't have the opportunity to do things, and then then COVID hit, and so although it's interesting, I think JAMS in particular was particularly flexible and adapting to remote hearings, and so almost everything we're doing at the moment is remote. I would expect as things get back to normal, we'll probably have we'll still have remote participation, but we'll probably have more hybrid hearings. But,
now, are you doing the remote arbitration mediation at JAMS, or are you doing it from home, or a combination?
Doing it from home. Yeah, the offices have been closed. They just reopened the Walnut Creek office this past week, and the office here will probably reopen in about a month or so. But,
so do you know how long you think you'll keep doing private judging?
I really don't. I said right now I'm enjoying doing it. Said one of the nice things about this is that you've got I can make the decision anytime to stop if I don't want to do it. But at this point I still do. So you have to do something. I said sitting at home and doing. I'm not a golfer, right? So just kind of sitting around doing nothing is a good way to turn into a vegetable.
Well, it keeps what I like to say the gray cells going.
Exactly.
So I want to start wrapping things up by asking you, what was your judicial philosophy, and did it evolve over 20 years?
Well, it always, I think it has to evolve, but the main thing I remember, when I started on the bench is, as a trial lawyer, I said, all the things that you hated about some of the judges on the bench, and so that you want to have predictability. So you want to make sure that people know that they're going to have a hearing in your court, that you're going to listen to what they have to say, and that you're going to make a reasoned determination whether they agree with it or not. At least that's one of the things I always wanted to do, even particularly here in the Court of Appeal, is that whatever your decision was, people ought to be able to understand why and how you made that decision. They may not like it, they may not agree with it, but they should at least understand, how you got there.
So I would assume that you wanted your opinions to be logical, organized, and understandable.
And certainly understandable. Yeah, so that's what I strived for.
Did you remember in private practice reading appellate opinions and you were wondering, what are the justices saying?
Oh yeah. Well, I said, I remember that from law school. I said because you never had the full opinion. You always had these little snippets in there, right? So, I said I certainly recall, reading cases and saying, what are they talking about?
So did you author any dissents in Division 5?
Again, I saw that on your list, and I'm trying to think how many I did on literally a handful of occasions. So I can't imagine, 4 or 5 at most.
Do you think dissents serve any purpose?
Well, I think they primarily serve a purpose if you're going to have a published opinion, so that if the case ends up on the A list at the Supreme Court, and people, if this is an issue where there's a real serious question about the law, that the Supreme Court may well decide to take a look at it and issue a definitive opinion. So I think that's where they primarily serve. Hopefully you're not just venting, with a dissent. I've seen a few of those.
Do you think the role of the judiciary has changed since you first took the bench?
I think it has, in the sense that all institutions have been subject to greater scrutiny and more cynicism, and I think it's harder to maintain public confidence in the courts than it used to be. I don't know. I remember. Was it 2000? They did the judicial branch did a survey and found pretty high level of public confidence in courts and the impartiality of the courts. And I'm not sure you quite get to that same level today.
Well, that sort of segues into my next question, which is, what do you think is the current perception that the public has of the courts?
Well, I said again, you've got this kind of hue and cry of institutional racism, and so the courts certainly aren't exempt from scrutiny on that, and I think that at least in some segments of the public, that has some support.
So if you had to do it all over again in your professional career, is there anything you would have changed?
Gosh, I said, I got to think back, and I think every step I've taken has added something that has been valuable to me. Starting out in the DA's office and getting that basis in trial practice, and the culture of ethical prosecution. Going into private practice and getting the civil background that I really hadn't had before was valuable, and then going on the bench was the best decision I think I've ever made. It was I enjoyed every minute on the trial court, and I enjoyed every minute over here.
Did you find anything rewarding about being on the bench?
Oh yeah. So you're making a real social contribution. You're actually getting disputes resolved, having a rule of supporting the rule. The rule of law is almost a cliche now, but it really is the basis of civil society, is the rule of law, and we're the ones that make the rule of law work.
When you were doing settlement conferences on the trial court, did you feel a real sense of satisfaction when you settled a case?
Oh yeah, so just getting a case resolved. I tell people now, the litigation is the most expensive and inefficient way of resolving any problem. We have the mechanism, and it's important to use it when it needs to be used, but the more cases you can keep out of trial, the better. So it's rarely in anybody's interest to have a case go to trial if they can avoid it.
And did you get the same sense of satisfaction upon completing an opinion that you've drafted?
Yeah, so again, I don't know how many, I used to edit myself unmercifully, but every time you read it, you always think, I said, if I could make this better.
I totally understand.
At some point you have to say enough. But yeah, to have something that's, that you can take pride in is important.
While you were on the bench, did you find it inhibited your lifestyle or groups you could participate in?
Oh, of course it does. So there's a lot of First Amendment rights you give up simply by virtue of being on the bench, and things that you'd like to speak about or say something about that you just can't. And it becomes so ingrained that even now, when I'm not subject to the same restrictions, I just automatically respond that way or react that way. So better not to say anything. But yeah, it certainly limits. And again, your contact with the bar, changes, when you go on the bench as well.
Any other issues or things you want to talk about that we haven't covered?
No. So people ask me often about, said what I thought that, the difference between the trial court and the Court of Appeal was. I always said, on the trial court, no matter what your assignment was, no matter, what you were doing, you truly never knew what your day was going to be like, because you had your calendar, you had your assignments, but there was always something.
But you were dealing with human nature.
You're dealing with human nature. And so on the trial court, you never knew what your day was going to be like. Here you do.
Yeah, your day's pretty well planned out.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much. It was just a pleasure interviewing you, and this tape or CD will be in the law library for your review or anyone else who wishes to look at it in the years
Well, I can't
to come.
imagine anybody's going to be all that interested, but thank you very much, Sandy. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.